Welcome to the 7th video in the Just In Case mini-series, sponsored by Quality and Equality, an organization development consultancy firm based in Oxford, United Kingdom. My name is Mei Yan Chung Judge, and I'm the director of the firm. The video is called Just In Case, and just in case you need to be reminded of something, just in case you want to learn something new, just in case you want to walk down memory lane and be reminded of some pieces of history in the field, just in case you need to be refreshed in a topic that you once know but not clear. So today we are joined by Judith Katz and Fred Miller. Both of them are ODN Lifetime Achievement Award recipients, and they pioneer transformative and groundbreaking work within the OD frame in topics on diversity, inclusion, equality, and equity. They have helped hundreds and thousands of organizations and communities to know how to leverage differences to increase engagement and to transform the climate of the workplace for the last 30 years. And in this video, Judith and Fred are going to talk about the new normal that we are currently facing and how this change is affecting us and how our differences impact how we experience this new normal. The extraordinary things I want to say is we booked Judith and Fred to film this video a while ago, a couple of months ago, and little do we know the timing of this video coincide with the incident in Minneapolis. The timing is extraordinary. So I hope that their video will remind us the criticalness of working towards a fair and just world. So thank you for offering your time and wisdom to share, Judith and Fred. So over to you.
Hello. I want to thank Leanne for inviting us to be a part of this. It's a real privilege to be a part of this and to share our thinking with so many people. We appreciate it. We also want to acknowledge what's going on in the world around us and demonstrations that are happening around the world, demonstrations for freedom and for equality. We just want to appreciate the people who are involved in those demonstrations and all of us who are supportive and sending supportive energy to them. We know that it takes energy to make change, and we're just appreciative of all the people who are putting that energy forward so that we can have a better world. So we want to thank them. Again, my name is Fred Miller. I'm with the Kaleel Jamison Consulting Group. We're a management consulting firm that specializes in organization development and that results in culture change. We're located in Troy, New York, 3.5-hour drive above New York City. We've been in the business of working on change since 1970. So this is our 50th anniversary year. And again, all that focus has been on OD and change and diversity and inclusion. And thanks for joining us for this occasion.
Thanks, Fred. I'm Judith Katz. Fred and I have been partners for 35 years working on organizational change. And what I want to do is just give us a little bit of an overview of our focus today in this video. But as Fred said, as we begin, I guess I want to also add my voice about the fact that what the United States and actually around the globe we're going through, both around the virus and also specifically in terms of what's happening around African American people's lives. And I think, as Fred said, we are fully supportive of the need for change. This is a moment for breakthrough. One of the really powerful things that I heard on television the other day was one of African American leaders talking about we have an opportunity in the United States to reset and create a new America. And I feel like in many ways, this is part of the moment we're in, which we'll talk about today. So part of what we're going to talk about is this new normal. What are we experiencing? What are we living through as the virus has impacted our lives around the globe? How this is not business as usual, how we have such an opportunity now for transformation. And so this is part one of the video. We'll do a second part video in which we'll actually talk about what we as OD practitioners can actually do specifically around that. So Fred, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Judith. The new normal. We know that things will never be the same, that we're in a major transition, which we've been in for many, many years. I think what's happening now is just accelerating the change process. And it will probably keep accelerating. So we all should tighten our seatbelts because we're in a time of incredible radical change. And we know it's so needed. It is so needed. We know that people have struggled on this planet and in organizations and in communities to have their voices heard, to have themselves be respected, to be able to give their best to organizations. So we needed a new normal. So it's always hard and it's awful painful around change. Joel Barker talks about when a paradigm shifts, everybody goes back to zero. And I think that's what's happened. Organizations that used to be great and wonderful are now struggling and asking their governments for funds. Things that people used to do, like go to the office, is no longer the way we're going to do things where everybody's at the office anymore, or at the factory, or on the production line. It's going to be different. And being different is good. And we need it different because what we had needed to change. So that's where we are. So the new normal has many components. It is who's essential and who's non-essential. And all of a sudden that little paradigm has been flipped up. All of a sudden those people with low wages taking the public transportation to work, suffering every day about getting to the job, living their lives, getting low wages, are all of a sudden the people who are saving our lives as we talk about the pandemic. So we are in a time of significant change and things will be different. Now, will they be different enough for us to be where we need to be as a human species? Who knows? But clearly things are changing. Everyone counts. I mean, that's what we're learning. Everyone counts. At least that's where we have to get to. But the new normal is going to be that some people who didn't count will count now. We have to be smarter about how we're doing meetings. Meetings have been very wasteful in many, many organizations. And how do we make our meetings more effective? How do we make our interactions more effective? How do we eliminate the waste in interactions and the things that happen in interactions that make people feel small or little or they don't count? We got to communicate. We got to make sure that people are understanding, get people on board, help people understand where we're going, why we're going there. Not just telling people what to do, but helping people understand why we're doing it so they can add their brilliance to the process of moving forward and not just order takers, not just people who are told what to do and nobody feels responsible for them fully understanding it. So we got to connect. We got to share information. We got to connect ourselves. We got to do all those things in a way that everybody feels important. Everybody feels like they count. We got to redefine the workplace. We have learned that people can work remotely now. And in the past, there were some organizations who said, no, we can never function with people working remotely. Everybody's got to be at the office every day. That old paradigm of if the boss doesn't see you and watch you, then we don't trust you to be working. And now we're asking leaders to trust people. And guess what? They hired them. They got good people. Trusting them should be the easy part. And yet, historically, we have acted like people can't be trusted to work. People want to do good things. People want to have meaningful lives. People want to make a contribution. So all those things are important. So the workplace is critical, and the workplace is going to change. And we're going to just have to redefine how we interact with one another. The quality of those interactions, the meaning that's in our interactions, the caring that's in our interaction, and looking for the we and not the I. So there are a lot of things that are going to shift in this new normal. Hopefully, we will make those shifts. If we don't make those shifts, we'll have to repeat learning the lessons again so that the next time we have more wisdom as we get into situations like this.
And I was thinking, Fred, as you were talking about the new normal, that, in many ways, the new normal is being redefined every day. And so the things that we thought were unimaginable yesterday are now imaginable. And I think that's one of the things, telemedicine. I always think about the fact that, doctors, you had to go into a doctor's office in order to be assessed in some ways. Now with telemedicine or telecounseling, all those things that we thought were not possible are becoming possible. I mean, I think that's what gives us the hope, which we'll talk a little bit about in a moment. But I think we really have to look at and take a deep breath to say what's normal now that wasn't normal before. And I think that brings us to the next notion about this is not business as usual. I think fundamentally what the virus and what is happening is people at all levels have had a loss of control. So the loss of control in terms of what's safe, every aspect of our life, where is work, what is home, it's all of those boundaries have now basically been erased and changed. It used to be that we had a workplace and we had a home place, and those things now have become blurred. So this loss of control in our lives, going shopping now is actually a place where you feel at risk. I remember the first time I went shopping when the virus really started becoming known about and in the United States. And I felt so at risk just walking down the aisles. I mean, that was something that used to be pleasurable, right? So these things have become not our business as usual. One of the things that I see happening a lot as we work with clients is how people are going right to task. With Zoom is great, but often what's happening is people are working back to back to back, Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. And so you and I, Fred, talked the other day. You said you've been in your chair since 7:30 in the morning. You hadn't even been able to get up and go to the bathroom. People get up, they go to a water cooler, they walk to the next meeting, they take a break. They go to the bathroom, they eat lunch, all those things. For many people, those have been erased. And so the going right to task and Zoom fatigue has become a new normal, has become a new way of life. And in many ways, I think, is we are hunkered down and living in this world right now. People are going and interacting with each other's devices. So it's kind of like I send you an IM and you respond back to me. I send you a chat, you respond back to me. Are we taking the time to really look at how people are feeling, what they're experiencing, how this is taking a toll on individuals' lives? Where is that? Last night, for the first time since the United States and DC has just loosened up we've moved into what we call phase 1. So we've loosened up some of our requirements about stay at home. And last night we actually had dinner with another couple. And we were 6 feet apart. We had 2 separate tables. We brought our own food. But I realized the difference of interacting with someone face to face, or face mask to face mask, versus being in this Zoom box, and the spontaneity and where conversations went and how that felt incredibly different. So we are interacting with each other as devices in so many ways at work, just getting what we have to do done. And in some ways, the virus, what we're experiencing, how we're experiencing it, is so painful for many people, so challenging that it's even hard to discuss or describe. And at work, people need to have those conversations, which we'll talk about in a moment. In many ways, we think about Maslow's hierarchy of need. And the basic need is survival, right? So for many people, that basic survival has now been eroded. And we know we've always had homeless throughout the globe. But the challenge for many people now is food insecurity and what's happening in terms of my being able to walk outside and feel safe. So on every level, people are feeling back to that basic level of survival and security and need. I go to the gym and we have a trainer that we work with, and I had an interaction with him this weekend, and he said, I've been spending all of my time trying to deal with bill payers, with bill collectors, and trying to figure out how I can get unemployment insurance. And, this is not something he spent his time with. This is someone who's worked hard, has 3 kids, all of that. But he's been on a contract where he only gets paid if he works, like many people. And so for many people, I think they're back to that basic survival level. And I think it's the other thing you spoke to, Fred, before about managers and learning how to trust. And I think one of the things is managers. You talk about not business as usual. Managers, being a manager, has definitely changed. Now, on the other side, one of the challenges is for some leaders and managers, they're learning how to step up to that challenge. But for some leaders, they're relying on surveillance software now to make sure, were you at your computer and did you press that keystroke and what was happening? So I think in many ways we're seeing the best of people and the worst of people at this moment. And this knowing that we're not in business as usual is an important opportunity, which I know you'll talk about in a moment. Our systems have been unfrozen. And when we think about Lewin's theory about unfreezing, this is a moment, incredible moment for change. And the theory and the paradigm of Lewin, which is unfreezing, changing, and refreezing, I don't know if there'll be a refreeze. Things are changing so rapidly. They've been changing, but they've really accelerated. I think about Peter Vail, a colleague of ours who wrote a book called Managing is a Performing Art. And he talked about living in permanent white water. You can't have more permanent white water than we're experiencing right now. And so I think, the virus has created a new normal. It's upheaval for all of us around the globe. I mean, when will we ever travel again? What does travel look like? Every industry, every business is having to redefine who they are, what they are, and how they work. And again, that is something we need to really inhale and understand the whole of it. So Fred, I'll turn it back to you to talk a little bit about what does this look like?
Thank you, Judith. Our differences impact how we experience this new normal. Our differences impact how we experience this new normal. Many people are saying, as we experience the pandemic, that we're all in the same water, but we're not all in the same boat. And in reality, that's been true in a lot of ways. Of course, sometimes we're in different oceans. But I think as some crises hit the earth, then we're maybe in that same water, but there's very, very different boats we're in. And so this is a very human experience we're having, a very human issue that we're having as we're trying to navigate through these waters. And navigate with a small boat is very different than navigating with a nice cruise yacht liner. And so the differences that we have in our organizations, sometimes when there's a crisis, people come together and put the differences aside. Sometimes when we have a crisis, the differences become more pronounced. And different organizations and different groups handle it in different ways. And we see right now, as we're having, demonstrations around the world, how people are addressing that. Are they coming together or are they falling apart? Are we seeing our differences or are we seeing our similarities? The other issue that's important is going to be critical as we're having this new normal and the experiences we bring to it and the human side of it is around privilege. We have to address the issues of privilege. They're there, they're painful for many people, and how do we have ourselves addressing those so we have more equity as we move forward in this world? And classism, which goes with privilege and also has its own space. And so how do we deal with the classism that exists in the world and all the inequality in the world? All that stuff has to be addressed. And how you experience them impacts how you experience this new normal or this transition to the new normal. And so therefore, different people are going to have different feelings. Different groups are going to have different feelings. Health issues and illness. Some groups have less access to health and hospitals and doctors. Telemedicine is very good, but you got to have a computer or got to have a phone, got to have a device. And when hospitals get busy, who do they take in? When hospitals need dollars, who do they take in? So how do we deal with this very human issue of health and illness and enabling people to get what they want, because every human deserves what they need around those? Loss and death. People are having different experiences about loss and death in this process. And, as people return to the workplace, return to their community, there are deaths that have occurred. How are they managed? How are they addressed in our organizations? How are they addressed in our communities? How do we do grieving? How will that happen as we move forward? Childcare, that's an issue that stands out. The governor of New York has been very clear, Andrew Cuomo, that the whole process of bringing people back to work, a major factor of that is the schools being open, because schools are for education, but a side benefit they give is they provide a place for children to be while parents or a parent is at work. And so schools in some ways become a child care center. And as we move back, if you have money, if you have privilege, if you have lots of opportunities, you may be able to have some different resource to take care of your children than someone who depends on school. In the United States, a lot of people depend on school for their children getting food during the course of the day. Many lunch programs are there just because they know that's a time when children can get a good meal. So the whole thing about childcare is big. It's always been a status class issue. And as we move forward, we need to know how we're going to address that. Working full-time at home, working alone, working with children at home, working with spouses at home, working with pets at home. People are going through lots of experiences of how to address that and how to make that work for people. All of a sudden now, the family used to be outside of the workplace, but when you're Zooming in the house, you have your family members walking through the Zoom some of the time. And that has become okay. That's part of the new normal. It's okay. I expect that. Some people have their dogs running through and their cats going across the keypad. So those are all things that we need to be aware of, but it's going to be different for different people, different classes, different identities. And how do we make that not be a new normal about the isms? And that is a real challenge we have as we have this opportunity to do some things differently, to be different, to create a new world in many ways. How do we not bring all that baggage of the past with us to this new world? So in some ways, and I know this is a little dramatic, we think survival is at stake. We really think that going and being more separate and more discriminatory and more unequal is a losing, failing end strategy. And what we need is a strategy that helps us on the individual level, on the work environment, in our communities, grow, develop, and talk about we, not I, and talk about us being better together and being able to bring all of ourselves to creating what we need to create so that we all have a better life experience.
Wow, thanks, Fred. I'm still sitting with all of what you said. I mean, we just passed this milestone in the United States of 100,000 deaths. And what we know is 60% of those were people of color, Black and brown people. And I think, I was talking to a colleague of color the other day, and it was clear she is having a different experience than I'm having. I know one person who's had the COVID virus. She's had people in her family who have died. And so I think even how we talk to one another about this, even how we're able to understand the different experiences. One of our colleagues lives alone. I'm fortunate I have my husband here. And so the differences that people experience even through this virus experience of being home and lockdown is quite different. And I think we need to make sure as OD practitioners, as we do our work, which we will talk about in the next video, that we really are sensitive to those differences and not assume that our experience is what everybody else is experiencing. And I think in many ways at times that talking about difference is not very comfortable. People want to avoid it. We want to talk about our similarities. And I think what you really spoke to is to recognize how our differences really are impacting our experience of this new normal. And we can't assume that my experience is what your experience is. Then, of course, if we layer on top the current situation, at least in the United States, of what's happening around African Americans, it becomes even bigger conversation. So today what we wanted to do is to really just lay out what we're seeing around the new normal, kind of talking about the different dimensions of it. We know everything is being changed. It's changing daily. It's being redefined. But we also see this as an opportunity for transformation. We also see this as really accelerating some of the variables that have been operating, but this is really a chance to really accelerate that change. And we know as OD change agents and the community of change practitioners, we can make this change. We've done it before. We can do it again. And I think that's the part that's hopeful. But we have to understand, as we diagnose any system, we have to understand the current state so that as we go about creating change, we're not using a small change. It was interesting. We need a big change. I'll just leave, as we end this video, there's one little story I want to tell. I was watching the news the other night, and the CEO of Nielsen was on, and he just joined Nielsen about a year and a half ago. And he said when he first joined Nielsen, they were doing some remote work, and he was very much against it. He thought that it really negatively impacted the organization. And he said now he is so for it because they've had to be remote. And he said that he could not have made this change incrementally. It was a change he needed to make, a big change. He needed to go all in. And I think that's some of what we're going to talk about next is how do we go all in to make change? Incremental pea shooter change is not going to do it in this new normal. And so thank you for watching, for listening. And hopefully you'll join us as we go into the conversation about how to make change as OD practitioners.
On behalf of everyone, may I thank Judith and Fred for sharing your thoughts and insights on the topics of what new normal. I was particularly captured and moved by the word cloud slide that you have developed about the new normal, who is essential, who is not, and what are we actually looking at the world of work from now on. And I hope all of you have been really taken by this presentation and hope that you find ways to discuss that with your colleagues. And if you'd like to contact Judith and Fred to continue this conversation, their email along with who they are and the links to various resources they so generously offer to the viewer are in the description in the video, at the end of the video. So a big thank you again to Judith and Fred for taking time to share with us. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the next video, the 8th video. Goodbye.